Hey, hello, this is Lou Paints, and I'm the miniature painting coach. We're gonna get back to what we were doing the last time. So, if you guys have been keeping up, the last time we were defining the lights and shadows in terms of the color that's going into the darkness, because it's at this point we're really figuring out what colors belong where on the miniature, and so this is going to be a much more illustrative miniature than the ones I typically do. However, we're gonna keep the darks saturated with color as much as we can. And so we kind of have our wet palette here with these colors. You can see my medium is kind of all run all around, which is okay because this is actually really good for a less dense amount of retarder in our paint. So our paints can dry a little bit faster without having it dry as quickly as it would normally without any retarder in it. Alright, so you can see here that the paints have kind of moving along. We can have the darks and lights. Now, okay, what are we going to do then? Well, there's still lots of color over here, and let's just kind of zoom in so we can see that that's still not all that satisfactory. The last time we worked on this green over here to shine in, and there's this parts that's yellow that's not quite hitting all the parts that's necessary on the model, and we're going to remedy that, right? Because essentially, with the way the yellow should hit this model is going to really represent how the light is going to hit. And it's not just the value, so we're going to hit this in spurts really carefully on the model, and we're going to make sure to wet blend that. So let's just go ahead and put these where it needs to be first, around here, a lot more brighter. We're gonna make sure to really get it in that brightness around here as well. Okay, and make sure we get it here. And you can see that I'm kind of painting right from literally this angle, and I'm just kind of looking at it from afar because I'm trying to identify to myself what colors look off when you kind of look at it in the overall. Because when we look at it like really close, like about this close, whoops, sorry, we look at it like really close in our miniature, and let's just kind of zoom in over here. We will find what happens is we can't really quite identify where is it gone wrong because we're too close. So when we look at it this far, things are different now because we are able to kind of determine where exactly are we trying to get what in. Okay, so my paints is kind of dry because I went on for a little bit more longer there, but that's fine. Let's just kind of put in here. These annotations over here actually need to be a lot more sharper than the rest. And that's because they are in the place where they're dark, and we haven't really figured out this part that is black, what color and how is it going to transition downwards. So we're just going to do that now. You can see that turquoise is getting added in. It really feels really nice, and we're gonna add just a little bit of skin color, right? Just kind of push this away towards the dress over here at the bottom, because this part is going to have just a little bit of less saturation because of the light, and we're gonna mix it in like this to kind of dim it off, right? So I'm gonna make it easy on us by just kind of going it like this really slowly. And you can see how I'm just kind of moving that light into places where it's simple to kind of go in and go through. Okay, so you can see how it's starting to come together in the light and in the shadows. So again, we're gonna take that magenta here, and then we're gonna put it over here because this part does not have enough magenta. And then we're gonna kind of scave it off to the side. We're gonna take a bit more magenta. We're gonna place it here as well, so that it's a lot more darker, get a lot more stronger hue. And then we are also going to place a little bit of teal around here. So if you guys like really enjoy the methods in which I used to paint, because I'm really considering about talking much more about my thought process of how I go about painting before I paint. Because painting is only just half the story, but thinking about what and how you're going to work with the subject matter is just as important. Now, it's always a good idea to kind of do enough research and enough thoughtful reflections on what you're going to paint before you actually get down to painting, because it creates consistency in being able to paint. So like what am I doing here is really a result of me thinking about how all the tiny little things are going to fit together. And that yellow, you see how I'm just kind of glazing colors on top of it, not really committed to any one color, and not putting it on too harshly, is because I do want that yellow to be still here, but it needs to be really soft, softly moved away from the rest of our model. And we're so gonna make sure to fade that into our turquoise and into the magenta that we're gonna put on top of it, so that there's as much color changes as there needs to be on our miniature. Gonna put a little bit more magenta there, right? And we're gonna add just a little bit more yellow now because it's ready. The surface is ready, so we're just gonna add it like this. You can see how it just kind of flows off on top of the miniature, which just makes it it adds this really nice glow to it, right? So I'm gonna put it like this, and then we're gonna make sure that we get all the parts that's supposed to be yellow here, which includes this part. Doop, 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 doop. And we're gonna make sure to double check how it looks from the side. One more over here, right on the top. And then now we're gonna get back our magenta because we want to make sure to blend that in. We're gonna add that magenta at the top here, a bit more, right? And then we want to, oops, that's cat fur. Oops, there's cat fur everywhere. So from my cat was sitting on my lap earlier. We just kind of blending this off, like so. And we can see here that there's the shine is going in and then it suddenly goes dark, right? Well, that's what we really want. And then we get more magenta. We place it in this corner over here, so you can bind that green and that those colors just kind of come together into that that green, that yellow, and that orange. So we have quite a lot of colors going on. And we're gonna take our black that we kind of placed on the last time and kind of slip it into this tiny little crevice, and we're gonna just play around with the hues to make it a little bit darker. But we're also going to balance that out because black's just not a real color. I'm gonna add some magenta in there, and then we're going to actually take my finer brush over here, which is the Sable Round, this is 0 by De La Rowney. It is a sable brush. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to add a tiny annotation of teal, a really strong one that's not really diluted or anything, on this part where it's really near her dress, the top portion of it. And we're just kind of gonna go like this really softly, and what it will do is that it will desaturate that part and make it more obvious that there's a color that's being reflected off that space. So we're gonna put here as well, and then we're just gonna stop. Okay, there we go. Let's get rid of that paint, and then we're going to take some more what's this, we're gonna take some more of the medium, and then we're gonna kind of blaze it on there, and then we're gonna take that magenta again and then place it in there, so it's really soft. You can see that there's the colors is kind of going through. We're just gonna guide that that teal down here. You can see that sleeve is coming together. Now we'll filter this out a little bit later with something that's a little bit more red, and we won't do it now just yet. We'll do it after that part dries. Okay, now what about the opposite part? Well, we haven't quite gotten all yellows yet, and these are the final points of yellow that we need to add. So you can see how I'm just kind of like stifling. This is the motion that I'm doing. I'm just kind of like hitting dots at the corner and just hitting it really softly. And then I'm going to take some magenta because it's kind of gone into the darks area. It's kind of dotted like so. Just blend it out like this. So there's a difference, right? And then I'm going to just kind of take that teal while there's still a magenta, so you can see that there's a magenta on my brush. So, and then we can see there's a teeny little bit of teal on the opposite side. I'll probably put a little bit more teal on it. So this like is a double-sided brush, right? So what I'm gonna do is that I'm gonna put the magenta on one side and gonna put the teal on the other. So we kind of get that nice little thing going on. So we're gonna put that small teal right over here where it's really soft and then blend it upwards. And then we're gonna add that magenta towards this space so we have it a little bit more red where it's pretty obvious it can be seen. And so we are blending all of these into our darks now because our darks are what's needing the attention. And over here later on we'll kind of add some grays to really get the flow to the really excessive dark areas. Okay, so what about here? Well, we'll just go ahead and add these teal annotations into that yellow so it's not as dense. So you guys can see what I'm doing here. Doop 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 doop. Right? And then we'll blend it to that place where it's just soft. Right? Just soft. And then we'll make sure to add back that blackness that's next to this tassel that she's wearing. And then on the top tassel, now we'll actually need to add our yellows back in there. And it won't really be a yellow tassel. It will actually be something around the reddish or orange area. But we're adding yellow now as an undercoat because yellow is a really opaque color, like white. And by opaque, it means that when we put onto our miniature, it really shows up. Like I didn't need so many layers after kind of putting on yellow. And so because it's so easy for me to put on, I can just kind of put as much as I want. And then so that I can quicken my process of placing the paint. And then after that, I can just add on a magenta after that so I can get orange. Okay, and then we're also going to add tiny annotations of our yellow on this. And we're gonna figure out what color of gems we want. Probably there'll be something like pink. Not quite sure yet, but we're gonna put that yellow on anyway so we can get the undercoat for it. Okay, over there needs more magenta. Over here, so go into the dark, we get that nice little shape to blend it in. And then we're also gonna get a lot of magenta and put it on her buttocks over here at the end so we can get that nice little curve. So you can see her nice curve on her waistline as well. There we go. And then now we're going to add just a bit of primary cyan. And so primary cyan is a much more, I would say, grayish turquoise or teal. And so if you guys can see over here, let's remove that cat fur because I do have cat fur everywhere. And my brush splitting is not a big deal. So it looks like it's blue, but it's really a much more, it's not the same as space marine blue. So ultramarine blue is in terms of art, that's what it's really called. Okay, so just kind of put this here. We're also going to take more of our cyan, just kind of move it into that area with the magenta on it to kind of make that heavy shift in blue, right? So you can see how that blue annotation really took over. We're gonna add more of that. down here, and then down here. Right, so we get to see that shape of the sleeve, which makes it really good. I'm gonna add a little bit more magenta, and magenta over here as well. Right, okay, and then now what about dark areas? Well, let's make sure to get the things we need for that sword first, and we're gonna just take our magenta and then kind of douse it over here all together. Okay, and we're gonna take just a bit of yellow, just a bit, and douse it on the edges, like so, like this. And then we're gonna actually take turquoise, and then we're gonna mix it in like this. Right, and you can see how now it has that really dark shade, but at the same time it's not too dark, and it seems like it's a bit reddish. We're gonna add a little bit more here because we need a little bit more. And then we're gonna take more of that magenta, and then we're gonna go at it really softly. You can see how the edge just kind of forms itself on a blade, which is something that we will want. And then we're gonna take a little bit more and douse it towards the bottom. And you can see it's now becoming a little bit more of the red hue, and that's what we really want. And then we'll go put the rest on the sleeve itself, like so. Right, and we are actually going to do something similar over here as well, similar like the sword. We're gonna put that yellow in here a little bit brightly. I'm gonna put it in this way because that's where the light, the subtle reflections of the light that's coming from the dark when we humans we adjust our eyes is coming from. And we're gonna place it on like this, really softly, really softly. Okay, now hopefully you guys won't be too overwhelmed by me talking about these much more heavy theory stuff to do with human perception, because even as an artist I tend to think about it in terms of science and a lot to do with emotion and gut feeling. So all of that is intermingled, and I tend to jumble them together. However, as I speak about it over time, if you guys actually like continue on with the vlog, or maybe I'll make shorter videos to explain really specific things, which sounds actually much more consumable, and I'll probably end up doing that. Now, why still? Because all these things are stuff that everybody learns from art school, and then it's not enough. Like, you have to put out yourself there into the real world and really pay attention to it, which is why some people who go into art school may not even develop these things as well as they might have been, even if they remembered all this theory. Because at the end of the day, when it comes to describing color, a lot to do with color is a human perception thing, and so it requires looking at other people's artwork, talking to other painters and other people, paying attention to how things are in real life. And so now I'm just kind of putting on this skin color into these areas here, so that I can kind of define these areas that are going to be in the dark. And so what happens is that we're gonna get a much more darker shade of all these colors, and then I'm going to also still take my turquoise, and then I'm going to blend that turquoise in to these colors, like so. Okay, we're gonna take a little bit more turquoise and blend it over here, and we can see that it becomes like a, is it a gray? Is it like an indigo? Is it a pink? We don't really know, but it's a mix of colors that's going to create this really interesting hue change, color change throughout the miniature. Okay, we're gonna make it like so. So you can see it's already brightened up the area a little bit. So we're going to actually place more skin color uncertain parts so that we can make it even more opaque. Over here as an example, we're gonna take more skin tones. See, I actually have a lot, so it just be doop 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 doop, right? And then we're gonna add a little bit over here and over here as well. Doop, over here, and we're gonna also add some over here because it's coming from underneath the sleeve. All right, so let's just remove some of our paint, and then over here what we're gonna do is we're going to add what color is on the opposite side. So it looks like green, and so we're gonna take our magenta, which is a contrasting color, just kind of dab it on like this, tap it on like this, tap it on like this, keep going in it, keep going in it. And then we're gonna darken that by taking turquoise. Okay, white turquoise. Well, the human eyes actually associate blue to be on the darker spectrum of colors, so which is why we're using blue. It's turquoise rather, because blue belongs in the turquoise and cyan family. You can see that we are getting this nice color shift to pink, and that part seems really bright right now, but it's actually going to become much more darker later on once the paint dries, because paints tend to be a lot more brighter before they dry up. But after they dry up, like, because it's wet, it's still wet, so the glaze, let me rephrase that. It's the fact that there's liquid and water shines off. You see how this is shine? It shines off that that glare onto us. That layering is glossy, and so it makes the colors more vibrant than they actually are. So once that the medium dries up, it's not going to seem all that bright anymore. And we're gonna slip in this indigo-ish gray up into the green and blend it so that it becomes more together. We're also gonna get more indigo and kind of touch on this area over here and kind of let it go into the darkness, because the darkness still requires some light. It's just that we will be removing all that light. For example, over here we're going to add a lot more. Okay, over here as well. Okay, and we're also going to add tiny little bits of teal over here to kind of contrast it off of her sleeve. So we're gonna put it like this, release more annotations of it, and then put it in between like so. And then we are also going to put it over here where the light will hit the bottom of her dress, right? And then we're also going to add just a little bit of yellow like so, and then we'll take that yellow and then we'll fade it off over here, and then you can see that it kind of shifts in, and that's what we want. Okay, there we go. I really like that. Okay, so now over here we're going to make sure we get more teal, put it in here, and then actually a lot more like so. Okay, and then we are going to take our magenta again and fade it off. So you can see there's a lot of blending that I'm doing by just kind of playing with this miniature, and I'm just kind of letting the light flow and letting the miniature guide me by kind of taking what the information that I know from real life and just kind of letting it flow in there. So we get these nice little ripples and nice little colors that come out from here. So this part is still not really bright enough, so we'll take that, boop, boop, and we will take our skin color and then we will type it in there, right? And then we will take our medium and then we'll feather it out. I believe that's the word, in like so. Take some white and then we'll kind of put it at the corners and get this nice little blend over here. Okay, and then let's remove that white because otherwise it's going to get dirty. And then we're going to just choose really specific spots to let the colors kind of move in, like watercolor, off to the sides, like this. Okay, so we get to see that nice little glare that happens when fire is on the ground, and so it isn't very smooth, and so we can just kind of see how it moves in its own way. And we're gonna take a little bit of turquoise and contaminate this part of the yellow, just kind of doing an abstract painting on our little miniature over here. No big deal, it's not any trouble, it's not going to ruin anything, it just kind of makes it a lot more natural. So we can see how that turquoise has essentially made that part of the miniature much more bright. Okay, and then we can just kind of put this here to kind of dance it off a little bit. So we see now here that basically what I've done is kind of done a light check on the miniature, and so there are parts of the miniature that still doesn't make sense, like for example the back of the staff. So I'll just go ahead and do that here to kind of make it a lot more darker here as well. So just kind of plop that all over thickly. It doesn't have to be neat. Okay, and then we'll also take that magenta again, and then we're gonna paste it on over here like this, right? And we're gonna take a lot more magenta so that we can connect the sleeves together like so. Okay, because that's the back of the staff and it shouldn't be too bright. Some here as well. Okay, and you can see that we get this nice little gradient that's going on here, right? And with this part later on, I'm going to with this part of the sword, in order to get the magenta to really stick, because right now you can see that it's a little bit purple on the black side, right? So what we can do in order to make sure that it differentiates itself with the dark is we're going to put on this amount of skin at the bottom, and later on I'm going to put some paints that will make it shine really bright at the edge over there. I'm gonna put this in here like so. Okay, and that part is going to dry out to be quite dark later on, so I'm not too worried. And then we're going to add some more magenta, and probably about now I'm going to stop the video soon. And this has actually been a really relaxing painting session for me, because I got to really play around with the colors that I wanted to play with. So I think it's overall a really good time. Okay, so last one, primary cyan. Let's take a lot more. Just kind of put it like this in blue. Makes it look really a lot more blue than it should be. We're gonna move it off like so with a lot more medium, because this blue will require a lot more medium to kind of let it flow into the dark. Okay, and we're gonna put on that blue around here as well. Okay, so let's see what we have here. Okay, so we essentially have done the next step of layering our darks, so it actually looks a lot more easier to see now in the dark end, and it isn't so boring. We're gonna mute the colors because they're way too saturated right now in certain areas, so we're gonna break that down later on. And you can see that when we turn, we see this, whoa, there's a lot of light coming from one place, and it's moving over, and so it's from this side as well. it needs to be fixed over here in order to really define that shape a little bit better. But we can see over here that it's not the light that's is of my room or the station that I'm working at that's causing that. It's really the lights of the that's painted onto the miniature itself that's causing that color to change, right? So this is really great because I've essentially already established my miniature, and at this point, anything that I add onto the miniature itself is only really meant to highlight, to detail and unify all the things that we've put together, and to add nuances to it. And what I mean by nuances is like small little changes in the metal, that small size and everything. Because right now, as it is, if I just kind of grab my miniature and just kind of pop it on the table, let me just kind of do it right now, show you guys what I mean, right? So if I just kind of place it right now on the table, it feels complete. It feels, for the most part, it's complete. So for me, how many percentage of this is complete? I think this is about, I don't know, let's say 65%, right? And you can call it done and not do anything about it. And I don't plan to take this to the like super level of display quality of miniature painting, but we can see that there's already the colors that we need to establish an environmental change onto the miniature, and that's the most important part in order to make the miniature really pop out on the viewer. Because right now, as it is, it looks like she's in her own world, and so she's at the bottom here, it's probably way too saturated because it seems like there's just a glob of paint or maybe a poison kind of moving onto her, which I don't quite like. We just kind of fade it off, but if you kind of look at it from the overall, we can kind of see that for the most part, the miniature is quite there, it's quite done. We just need to get rid of the whites over here, desaturate this area in order to get the overall a little bit more unified, and then past that point, we're just really adding more character. Maybe we'll draw some patterns on the shirt. We can start to do some freehanding for her jewelry a little bit before we add on our metallic paint. We can also add just a teeny little bit of patterns maybe at the side of the dress, because at this point, whatever we choose to glaze onto the miniature to create those nice little shapes is all necessary, and they just act to complement the character. And so which is great. I'm actually pretty happy with it so far, and maybe I'll take a little break from this miniature to work on other miniatures for a bit before we come back to it. Just kind of enjoy it for a little bit. Now, alright, well, that's enough enjoyment. Let's just kind of plop it on back here and just kind of come back to it when we feel like it. Okay, so Tulu.